All right, we're going to do a deep dive into the Magical School of Restoration in the Oblivion. This is updated for the remaster. So I already made two parts to this for Classic Oblivion. If that's what you're interested in, it's very, very different actually. So first, I want to talk about some differences between Oblivion and Skyrim because a lot of people coming to the remaster played a lot of Skyrim. One, you don't actually need to heal anything to gain experience. If you cast a heal spell, even if you're full, it's gaining you experience towards the skill. Two, custom spell making is incredible. This is the most versatile school of magic by far. In fact, my favorite thing to do with it is to fortify acrobatics and jump over bridges and lava and walls of lava and rocks to basically skip Oblivion Gate or skip a lot of content in the game and just feel really special doing that. There's no wards. Turn Undead is in Conjuration. There's no circles, there's no poison or anything like that. It's focused on buffing yourself with Fortify, absorbing to steal things from your enemies, and yes, of course, healing. So something I need to talk about before we really get into it is I actually discovered exactly how the experience gain works for magical skills. So first, it is proportional. So if I spend 200 Magicka, I'm gaining double the experience that I would if I spent 100. Now that's only if you're at 33 skill because it's actually based on the base Magicka cost. So for example, if I cast a spell to restore 10 health, if I'm at 50 restoration skill, that will cost this base cost times 0.8 because that's the multiplier. If I was only at 33 skill, this is the experience it would give me. So this base cost column is the experience it's giving me, where this is how much Magicka I'm actually spending. So as my skill goes up, I will spend less Magicka, but I'll be gaining more experience. These numbers are some of the testing that I did to figure this out. There was also a massive nerf to major skills in Oblivion. So when I made my major skills tier list, I didn't actually know this. I don't think anyone else really does either. So I want to talk about the specifics. If you have a minor skill and you're not specialized into magic, about 7 Magicka base cost will gain you a single experience point. If you pick it as a major, it goes up to only 6. So in Classic Oblivion, major skills gained experience 2/3 faster. It was 66.6% faster. So it's basically a multiplier of 5/3. In the remaster, it's only a multiplier of 8/7. It's much slower. It's not changing very much. It's only a 14.3% increase. And that's because in the UESP, they did some digging and they saw that minor skills provide 12.5% less experience to increasing your character level, but it was actually a misinterpretation of what they found. Minor skills are gaining 12.5% less skill experience. And so they're 7/8 of a major skill. And that's why major skills are gaining experience 8/7 faster. So they changed how good major skills are in terms of how fast they increase. If you ever played Classic Oblivion and you didn't have a skill as a major, chances are you weren't getting it to 100 unless you were really, really grinding out that skill. Now that's not really the case. They seem to have buffed a lot of experience gains across the board, and they really nerfed the bonus experience that you gain from choosing something as a major skill. Specialization stayed about the same. It's basically 1/3 increase, so it's a multiplier of 4/3. So if you combine them, your multiplier is 32 over 21, 8/7 times 4/3. The math about that doesn't really matter. If you don't care about that, these are the specifics. Obviously, choosing it as a major skill and choosing it as a specialization will increase your experience gains. The big one actually seems to be specialization. Specialization now is more important than your major, where in Classic Oblivion, your major was more important than your specialization. And obviously, combining them together will increase your experience gain the fastest. Now, something I want to show you about this. So because these experience gains are proportional, this graph shows how much experience I need times how much Magicka multiplier I have for my skill. So if that didn't make any sense, let me show you. So every level, it needs this much experience. In fact, this is the formula. 0.25883 times your skill level to the power of 1.5. So if I need to get from level 99 to 100, this is the experience I need, 254 experience. However, you have a multiplier for your skill. So if I have 5 skill, my multiplier is 1.34. So my Magicka cost for any spell is going to cost 1.34 times the base cost. As I get up to 24, my multiplier goes down to 1.12. As you get to 100, it goes all the way down to 0.2. So it's 1/5. So this graph here is actually multiplying my experience required times my Magicka multiplier for the restoration skill. So what this means is after level 70, it's actually going to get easier to increase all magical skills because they're going to cost less Magicka. So I will be able, with the same Magicka pool, to cast more spells and gain more experience. So because I'm gaining so much more experience, it's actually going to take less spell casts after level 70 to increase my restoration. So early game, this is skill 5. Very early game, it's very easy. And then after you get to about 70, it peaks at difficulty to increase your level, and then it gets even easier again, where it seems like 99 kind of matches up with about skill level 50. So it's about that easy to level up. So that's how the difficulty for leveling in Oblivion, any Magic school, looks. It starts out very easy, gets kind of hard, and then gets easier as you get to those higher levels, which is not the norm. Typically, all skills will get harder to level because these last ones require a lot of experience. But because Magic skills are based on how much base Magicka you're spending, you're able to really spam expensive spells. Another way I can highlight that is, well, the experience needed to go from 5 to 25 is only 300. But to go from 75 to 100 is 5,000. But your average multiplier when you're at 75 to 100, well, that's going to be 0.356. So really, the Magicka that you're actually spending is going to be about 1,800, where from 50 to 75 with that average multiplier, you would need to spend 2,000. So this is actually the hardest part of raising your restoration skill level, is going to be to go from 50 to 75. It's going to get easier after that. There are also cutoff points for custom restoration spells. You cannot have something that costs 26 or higher as a novice. You need 25 skill. This is for all schools of Magic. These are kind of the special cutoff points, and these are the base Magicka cost. So if I have something that actually costs 400 and I have 100 skill, it will only cost me 80. And that multiplier is 1.4 minus your skill level times 0.012. So at 5 skill level, it's 5 times 0.12, which is lowering it down to 1.34. So that's why that works that way. At 100, it's 1.4 minus 1.2, so your multiplier is 0.2, which is 1/5. In Classic Oblivion, Restoration only gains 0.6 experience per cast. Where now, if you looked at this one, if I cast a spell that has a base cost of 150 here, 149, well, I can look as a major in specialization, I need about 4.6 Magicka. So what I can do is I can do this divided by 4.6. So each cast of that is actually gaining me 32 experience. If we divide that by, if we say equals this, divided by 0.6, you can see we're gaining 54 times more experience than we were in Classic Oblivion, which is just insane. So if you're able to cast a spell, and I could cast this as a journeyman, you don't even need expert because it's below 150. This is how you would gain a ton of experience for any spell school. You'd be casting a spell that costs just below 150 as its base cost, and maybe fortifying your restoration. Speaking of fortifying your restoration, this is where we're actually going to talk about spells. So we're going to start with Fortify skill because that is such a big deal. So Fortify skill has a base cost of 0.6. And the way you calculate spell cost is you have your magnitude. Your magnitude has a multiplier of whatever spell magnitude you pick to the power of 1.28. 1.28 is not that crazy high, but anytime you pick 100 magnitude, your spell is going to cost about 363. The multiplier for base cost is the base cost divided by 10. So if it says 0.6, the multiplier is actually 0.06 if you look at the UESP. Then that's just straight multiplied by the duration. So if I want to have a fortified skill for 30 seconds, if I want to fortify restoration 50 for 30 seconds, well, it's going to be this 149.5 times 30 times 0.06 times your skill modifier. So at 50 skill, my modifier is 0.8. So my final cost would be 215. But you can see if I go to 100 skill, my final cost is 53.8. And I actually put that, here, I fixed it. I put that right here. This 53.8 is what this spell would cost if I went from 50 skill to 100. So Fortify skill, not only is it the best enchant in the game until you get 100 skill naturally, getting your skills artificially to 100 becomes really powerful because you're able to gain those skills so quickly. Also, even other skills like Blade, Blunt, and Marksman, they lean really heavily on skills. The formulas don't really gain much from your attributes like Strength or Agility. Each point of skill is typically about 3 times as valuable as a point of Strength or Agility. So really you want to be getting your Blade or Blunt or Marksman skill fortified if you're trying to do damage. Obviously, naturally gaining your skill is really useful, because then you unlock the perks as well. Fortifying your skill does not unlock perks except for things like Armorer for some reason, and it usually lets you bounce off water, though I haven't tested that in the remaster. a short duration Fortify skill can give you a massive edge. So let's look at this scenario. Pretend you have 200 Magicka and you want to gain restoration levels. If you have base 50 skill, that's a 0.8 multiplier. What you could do is cast a spell for 200, which is all of your Magicka, and gain 250 base cost worth of XP. Or you could Fortify Restoration 50, which will cost you 43 and gain you 53 XP. I still have 157 Magicka left, and then follow it up with a spell that costs 149 base cost. We're going to round to 150 for clean math, but technically you wouldn't be able to cast that until you get expert. So we're going to say 150 though. Because your skill is artificially at 100 for 6 seconds here, your multiplier goes down to 0.2 and you're only going to spend 30 Magicka on that spell, whatever it is. So you're going to spend a total of 73 Magicka for 203 experience. But instead, if you just cast that expensive spell by itself, you would spend 120 Magicka for less experience. So you can see you're gaining more than twice as much restoration experience per point of Magicka spent. However, I did test if you just spam Fortify Restoration on yourself, for whatever reason it doesn't catch on that your restoration is fortified, and so it doesn't reduce the cost of the next one, unless if it's a different spell. So for whatever reason it doesn't work on the same spell. Seems like a glitch, but so don't just make one Fortify Restoration spell and spam it thinking that that's going to work. I do want to talk about a little bit more about some of these other effects. Absorb Attribute is really bad. It's got a base cost of 0.95. So if you want to absorb strength, 25 strength for 30 seconds, that costs 175 Magicka. Even at 100 skill, that costs over 43. And that's just to get 25 attribute. Most attributes also cap at 100, just like the skills. So there's not really any purpose there. I've pretty much never used this as an enchant or as a spell. It's pretty bad. There are some gimmicky things you can do with it, like fortifying speed on something that you weakness stacked and absorbing that speed from it, or absorbing an attribute. There's sketchy things you can do, but in normal gameplay, you're pretty much never going to use this. Absorb Fatigue, again, it's basically worse than Restore Fatigue. Either you want to damage your opponent's fatigue and knock them down with like hand-to-hand, or you want to keep power attacking and blocking and you're trying to restore your fatigue. I found it's very rare that you're trying to do both at the same time. And it costs 3 times as much as Restore Fatigue. And Damage Fatigue only costs 4.4. It's in the Destruction School, so it's a little different, but it is significantly cheaper. So if you're looking to Damage Fatigue, I would just use that spell. And if I'm looking to Restore Fatigue, I would just use that. You also cannot use Absorb spells at range. They just don't work. And if you do them in melee, it makes a link between you two. And if you go too far apart, it breaks and it stops. And it's just a waste. Personally, I don't ever use Absorb Fatigue. Absorb Health can be pretty good. I think it's pretty decent on a weapon enchant. However, it's very expensive. Elemental damage is about 7.6 base cost. So it's about double that. And Weakness to Fire doesn't boost Absorb Health. It does boost fire damage. It's decent as a backup weapon enchant. But remember, if you're playing on Master difficulty, let's say I had 20 on Master difficulty, well, here, let's do a friendlier number. We'll say 24. On Master difficulty, I would do only 4 damage. That means it would only heal me 4 as well. So even though I'm using all that expensive charge to deal 4 damage, I'm only healing 4. So normally difficulty doesn't reduce how much you heal. It only reduces how much damage you do. But Absorb Health, the heal itself is also reduced because it's based on the damage dealt. So if you're doing anything beyond Adept, I would almost never use Absorb Health because it just doesn't work very well. Absorb Magicka can be pretty fun. If you fortify enemy Magicka, you can then absorb it. It's expensive. I don't ever really do that. I've seen people do it with an Atronach build. They'll have Absorb and Fortify Magicka on a weapon enchant to get their own Magicka up. It can work. I've never really done it. It just seems really goofy and niche, but maybe you'll use it. Absorb Skill, again, it costs more than double Absorb Attribute at 0.95. It costs 2.1. It's absurdly expensive. You'll pretty much never use Absorb Skill. Again, unless you're weakness stacking on your own summon and then fortifying its skill and then absorbing it. That's really just a cheesy thing that you do for fun to make a video, but I would never actually do that during normal gameplay. Fortify Attribute can be pretty cool with like Fortify Speed and stuff, but it's typically too expensive. It costs 0.6, so if you really want to get something for 2 minutes, even like 30, it's very expensive. A common one that I end up doing late game is Fortify Willpower, but if I want to do 100 for 2 minutes, that costs 653. So first I'm going to have to be fortifying my Magicka to even be able to cast that. And notice, let's say I picked Intelligence, that costs 653, where fortifying Magicka would only cost 163. So if we double that, That would be the cost of getting 200 Magicka for 2 minutes, where this would be the cost of getting 200 Intelligence for 2 minutes. So you pretty much never want to do Fortify Intelligence unless you're trying to reduce the amount of spell cast, but Fortify Magicka is definitely the way to go. If you're ever trying to get Magicka, Fortify Magicka, not Intelligence. If you want to do an attribute, you do Willpower, because at high levels, your Magicka regen is exponential. It's a quadratic equation. It definitely, I've found, it doubles or triples as you get into the 200, 300 range. You can look at my attribute tier list. I talk more about willpower. Mana regen past 200 willpower starts to get pretty crazy. Fortify fatigue, in classic Oblivion, you could fortify your fatigue and it would make you do more physical damage. This doesn't happen in the remaster because fatigue's not part of the damage calculation. It's pretty cheap though. 0.04 is a very low base cost, where restore fatigue has a base cost of 2. So obviously it's a much cheaper version of getting some fatigue. With that said, if it ends during a fight, you could have negative fatigue. So it doesn't have a ton of value. But because it's so cheap, if you want to use it to get pushed through a fight, you need that extra fatigue and you don't have the Magicka to restore it, that would be a case where you would want to fortify fatigue. Because look, I can do 100 for a minute for only this much at max level. And maybe I only need it for 30 seconds. It's basically free to just have that extra fatigue to make sure I'm going to block, to make sure I can do one more power attack, and maybe that'll give me time to escape and let my fatigue naturally regenerate. Fortify health, I think there's almost never a purpose to do this because you should be using shield or casting spells or finding ways to get magic resist and shield. Fortify health just isn't very effective. If you're already at the armor cap and you're trying to get just a little bit more, it's not that crazy expensive. That's a minute. That's 100 health for a minute at max skill level. It's not crazy. But if it ends mid-combat and you have less than 100 health, you will be dropped to 1 health, which could very easily get you killed. So I think getting high defenses is better. It also makes heals cheaper. If 100 health is effectively 1,000 health because of my armor and my magic resist, well, it's very easy to heal 100 health. Where if I just have 1,000 health, that's very difficult to heal. Obviously, that's an extreme example of that, but I just wanted to highlight that. Fortify Magicka, the best sigil stone enchant in my opinion, plus 50 Magicka. Some people have talked about plus 12 willpower. I think 50 Magicka is still better because you can just cast that spell to get really high willpower. And having that starting point Magicka will always let you get those ramped spells up if you want to do that. And you don't even really need a ramp. If I have 4 plus 50 Magicka enchants as a Breton mage, I have 500 Magicka, which sure I couldn't do it for 2 minutes, but I could fortify my willpower for a minute and attack on 100 Magicka extra. My Magicka regen is going to be really fast, and then I could do those 2-minute ones. It wouldn't even be much ramping. It's great as a spell as well. I like to tack it on to other spells. With that said, it is nerfed from Classic. In Classic, I added this to every single spell I had. Every offensive spell, it didn't matter. It at least had some short duration Fortify Magicka because it improved my regen. With the changes in the remaster, regen stops after you cast a spell, and having more Magicka doesn't change your regen. It's just based on willpower. So it's not quite as good. You don't always need to do it, but it's still a very valuable, powerful spell. Something doesn't seem right here. I thought it cost 137. No, there we go. So it costs 130 at max restoration skill. So it costs more than Magicka you get, but that's for 2 full minutes. So it's very useful. There's also some chaining things you can do that are pretty cheesy, but I don't like to talk about cheesy stuff. It's not really how I play the game. I like to play naturally. I've already talked about Fortify skill. If you don't know how to get it, you can get it from doomstones. If you don't know what the magical stones are, they're all awesome. They're a lot of fun. I've had multiple videos where I've talked about the Tower Stone just because it's so quick and near the Imperial City. A lot of these are good. I have an old video where I rank them. Most of that would still apply. I like the Serpent Stone because it gives you a free Paralyze once a day. I've used the Atronach Stone that won't give you Fortify skill, but that's a really powerful one. Also, the Joan Stone, when you have 10 Renown, unlocks invisibility even if you don't have 50 Illusion, which is really useful, and also unlocks Fortify skill and can be used with that Fortify Acrobatics to skip over some Oblivion Gates and things like that. Restore health is very overrated. I think a lot of noobs just spam the spell because they don't know what to spam their Magicka on. And, when you're desperate, fair enough, but it is very expensive. It's better used as potions, I think. So if we do 10 health and we only have 25 skill early game, that's costing almost 21 Magicka each time you cast it for only 10 health. If you have 100 health, you got to cast that 10 times. That's why you see that's very low. It's very weak. It is not until you get to that late game where, okay, now I can heal myself 40, and that doesn't really cost anything anymore. Oops, sorry, that would cost 18. It costs 18 Magicka to heal myself for 40. And late game, I could heal myself 80 It's only 45 Magicka. If I want to heal 120, it starts to get expensive. So it's very expensive, but you can heal yourself a lot late game. I would not spam it. I would use my Magicka in other ways and just accept that I'm losing health, especially with the new health regen over time. Restore Fatigue, it only has a base cost of 2, so it is much cheaper than Absorb Fatigue. But honestly, Restore Fatigues are also the easiest potion to get, so I rarely cast this as a spell. If I ever want more fatigue, I usually just chug a few potions because they're food in the game, and you can find food everywhere. If you sell all those potions, though, having one of these spells as backup isn't always the worst, especially with the new block mechanic in the remaster. It'll allow you to make sure you can always block no matter what is going on. And Restore Attribute. Get one of them from just buy one of the spells, and then you can make a custom spell to just restore 3 to all of them. Because anytime they get damaged, it's really annoying to just have intelligence damaged or have your willpower damaged. It's permanent, and you need to actually restore it with a spell. To do that, you can just go to an altar and it does it for you, or you can make a custom spell so you can do it even without having to go back to town. Cure Disease is great too. You need 50 skill to get it. As soon as you get that, that's one reason I always try to get Restoration to 50 very early. You actually cannot get Resist Fire, Frost, and Shock unless it comes as a racial bonus as a custom spell, which is kind of weird. So you really just have Resist Magic from the School of Restoration if you want some magic defenses. I don't usually do that either. I enchant it on my gear, or I'm a Breton, and I get a mundane ring. There's Resist Magic is more powerful than Spell Absorption and Reflect Spell from Mysticism because both of those don't protect you from reflected spells. So if you've ever had a Spell Absorption build in late game, you've just blown yourself up when you're fighting Mankar Cameron or someone else, it's because Spell Absorb and Reflect Spell do not protect you from reflected spells. Resist Magic is the only one that does. And so that is really, if you want to make sure you can become immune to all damage, which I don't really like to do, but if you want to be just protected from all damage, you can get like 80% magic resist, and that will make sure you are safe no matter what. All right, that's all I got for now. Thank you for watching. I might make a part 2 on this because there is more to talk about, but I really wanted to make sure everybody saw how exactly the leveling works. It is proportional. So if you cast a spell that costs 200 base cost, it will get double the experience. I think that's very important to know and very important to see. And also it's good to know that major skills have a massive nerf. Your major skills don't really matter as much as they did in Classic Oblivion. 14% just is not that much at all. They don't seem to matter at all. Your specialization does. I think 33% is enough to be a noticeable difference. And combining that with the major skill can be nice, but I just wouldn't really worry about it. Whatever you want to pick for major skills. If you really wanted to do speechcraft and security, go ahead. It's that plus 20 bonus at the beginning is pretty useful. For example, like Conjuration, you can start out with a summon, and so you don't have to waste your time spamming bound whatever just to unlock any summon. So I could see picking magic schools increasing in value just because you can get that plus 20 skill, get that out of the way much quicker and without having to go buy a spell. Okay, thanks for watching.